today, you New World Order jackboot.
My name's Frank.
Here's the thing, Frank. If I feed you, then every bum you talk to about it is gonna show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's.
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch. It was a restaurant.
Sooner or later, there'll be raiders. They'll come at night, quiet and armed.
Call Joel. We'll be fine.
Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. I'm your host, Nick Leach, and this week we have a huge, massive episode to get to. We're on episode 3 of The Last of Us, and man, is it a good one. So with that, I have, as usual, my guests, Chris and Paige. So welcome back to the podcast, guys.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Really enjoyed this episode. Super excited to dive into it and kind of break it down with Nick and Paige today. Honestly, one of my favorite episodes of TV that I've seen definitely this year, if not in the last year.
Hey, what's up? I enjoyed this so much. I am probably going to rewatch it eventually, but it didn't have to be super active just to be so amazing and engulfed you. It was great. I'm ready.
I'm already seeing people all over the internet saying that if this is not one of the best TV shows ever made, it at least is HBO's magnum opus. It's like the best thing HBO has done so far. And I'm in total agreement here. It's the best thing we've seen so far of The Last of Us. It sets up so much for the rest of the show. It's definitely a departure from what we've seen so far. And such an amazing just one-off, and I'm so excited to get into it. So let's just dive right in. After Tess sacrifices herself at the Capitol building, Ellie and Joel are on foot to Bill and Frank's. We have not yet met them. They have made it 10 miles west of Boston so far. As the two set off on the rest of their journey to Bill and Frank's, Ellie is full of childlike wonder and curiosity, whereas Joel is grumpy and hesitant to take care of anything or anyone new after the loss of Tess. However, when Ellie comes across an immobilized infected during a quick supply search, viewers also get to see a different side of her, like a kid in a science class dissecting their first frog. Ellie slices up an infected's head to see what's really going on in there before viciously stabbing the beast to death with her beloved switchblade. This is our reminder that Ellie is a badass. So I really liked the way that they started this episode, showing us immediately, or at least a little bit later, maybe a day or two later, after Joel and Ellie lose Tess. I see in Ellie here that there is this primal desire. I mean, it goes back to kind of, again, the overarching theme of this entire show being love. I mean, there is a primal desire in all children to have their parent who will protect them. And so even though Ellie was more fond of Tess, it's Joel who has now protected her twice. So I think that is a really interesting dynamic that is already showing to start between them, even though at least so far, Joel really almost despises Ellie at this point because he kind of blames her for the death of Tess.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked, like you're kind of saying, Nick, just the opening sequence of events here. You know, Joel's washing his hand in that stream, and then, which beautiful shot right there, by the way, opening shot. Love that. And then Joel, kind of hesitates and then tosses that food to Ellie, and then, like you're kind of saying, Ellie's like, hey, don't blame me for something that isn't my fault. She's very not confrontational, but just putting Joel on his lane, kind of so to speak. But then during this kind of sequence of events too, I'm just really enjoying how the show is showcasing that their relationship is changing and evolving. And so just kind of the banter that's going on. So even when he's Joel's going to get that gun put away, and Ellie's seeing it's just the two of us, I was thinking, and then Joel's no to having a gun again. I just keep coming back to that because I just love how they're playing off of that that was in the game because she's always like, oh, I want a gun.
Ellie's like a dog with a bone.
She's like, give me a gun, give me a gun, give me a gun. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the banter. Like when they're in that building or no, Ellie's like, is there anything bad in here? And Joel's like, just you.
Well, I mean, that's a callback. I mean, he said that in episode 2 as well. So he's bringing that joke back. I mean, it's such a dad joke, but I mean, Joel's.
I love it though. I'm a
Yeah.
sucker for it. But yeah, I'm just really enjoying how they're setting up their relationship so that the things that they're going to go throughout the rest of the show actually are starting to make sense from a relationship standpoint.
I think in this episode, you can really see that he's trying so hard to hate her, but deep down, he really likes her. And I just think it's adorable because he just wants nothing to do with her, but yet he's trying to protect her. So I think it's a good it's just like the game. It's just fun. It's fun to watch it. And I did like that little banter with the gun as well. I knew that was something she would say, but
We see somebody who's not quite a clicker, but he's getting there, that's stuck beneath the rubble. And I think at this point, this is one of the stalkers. He can still see, but he's still like the cordyceps virus still has control of that one eye. So I think that when Ellie comes across this guy, she's really still struggling, like she was in the second episode. I mean, she's sitting there talking to Tess and Joel, saying, "How can you kill them? Like, how do you separate the human from the infected?" And you can really see that she's battling this, and as she is looking over, and her curiosity is taking over her as she's looking at this infected guy under the rubble, and then finally gains enough courage, because I mean, this is somebody who's completely incapacitated. It's not going to actually be able to kill her, so it's the perfect specimen for her to just look over and then finally actually do her first kill. So I thought that was a really interesting scene. And also just the detail on that prosthetic, it's so good. So finally we get a little bit more information, the history of what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. After the duo depart for their supply stop, Ellie asked Joel how the infection began. It spread through flour. When Sarah didn't eat any of the cookies her neighbor made, and when Joel didn't get pancake mix, eat a biscuit, or bring home a cake for his birthday back in the first episode, they were spared from infection. After explaining the grim origins of their now desolate world, Joel and Ellie eventually come across an even more grim mass grave, one Joel was trying to shield Ellie from. The graves are of those from country towns and suburbs that were evacuated by Fedra to go to a quarantine zone or a QZ. However, little did people know that if there wasn't enough room in the QZ, the bodies were mass executed. Just another example of how the cruelty of humans far outweighs the dangers of the infection.
I'm trying to remember. I think they don't explicitly say, there was like flour products or anything that started all this in the games, but I believe it was like a running theory that fans had. So I think it's really cool that they did actually have Joel share that that's how this all started up. And then, yeah, kind of cool, like you were saying, Nick, that's why some people did and some people didn't get sick. So I guess the lesson out of this is to eat your meat and eggs, even if those things are going up in price these days.
Check the labels, check the FDA warnings.
Gluten-free people, you're going to make it.
I also liked how they didn't tell us how it started through like a radio or something. It was just a discussion between a father-like figure and Ellie, because she's just so curious. And she was like, was it monkeys? Which I generally laughed at because I see them every day. And I'm like, now I'm thinking, oh my God, The Last of Us is going to come out. But I thought it was a cute interaction. And then we got more of like a back history with it as well.
Yeah, and I liked that that whole scene where they're walking past that plane, and Ellie's like, "Wow, you got to be on one of those, got to be in the sky." And then from Joel's perspective, as someone that's done it, he's like, "Oh yeah, it was the worst. You're crammed in between two people on a full flight, paid $12 for a sandwich." which is exactly how I view flying. So I was like, oh yeah, 100%. I hate flying because it's the worst. But I just thought that was a kind of a cool dynamic where Ellie was just like in awe that Joel got to experience something basically from 20 years prior.
Also, this exemplifies something that I just love about this show, in that they are able to tell exposition through the storyline. I mean, this is basically what would usually just be an exposition dump in a normal show, but they do it in such a way that it makes sense. I mean, it's this person who's been there since the beginning telling a young person kind of what's happened, and it feels natural to us, like a natural conversation, rather than just exposition dump for exposition's sake because the audience needs to know this information.
And again, us as audience, or like us, like Ellie, we're kind of the Ellie in a sense, watching or listening to Joel speak, which is what I would have learned in film school. We're always the person looking at, I can't speak. It was a long day at work.
The audience is also a character, yes.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, the audience is also a character. There we go.
So at this point, the show cuts back to September 30th, 2003, just 4 days after Outbreak Day in the suburbs of Boston. People are being rounded up to presumably go to a QZ, but sadly, we know their true fate as we see in the cut from seeing the little piece of cloth in that mass grave, and then suddenly we see that on a person that's being rounded up. Survivalist Bill is watching all of this go down on his CCTVs in his basement while he waits for Fedra to leave his house. Bill is no amateur survivalist either. He has a gun and ammo stockpile that would make Rambo jealous, an impressive talent for setup traps, and a sophisticated fencing system, and the green thumb of a seasoned gardener. Honestly, he's living his best life post Outbreak America. So this brings up literally my favorite line in this show so far. Not today, you New World Order jackboot fucks. I just love that. It's something that one of my friends, Justin, would absolutely say. I actually, after this episode, watching it, I actually texted him. I was like, dude, this is you. Like, I have never seen anybody that exemplifies you in a TV show more than Bill. I mean, he's a guy from Texas who is basically a prepper himself, so it's really cool. The other thing that I found so interesting was that this line actually wasn't original dialogue. Craig Mazin originally wrote it as what Bill was thinking, and Nick Offerman on the set said, just one thing, Craig, this line here, New World Order jackboot fucks, I'm saying that out loud.
Honestly, it worked.
I loved it.
It worked for sure.
It like really just in a line showcases who the character is completely. He's sitting in his basement, all his cameras. He's like, not today. As like they're wheeling all these people out. And then I just loved how after that, he just is like, all right, cool. And then that soundtrack, I can't remember the song, but that soundtrack starts up. He's just driving the truck around, getting the boat, going to everybody's houses, stocking up, blowing through gates at full speed. I loved it.
He's honestly everyone's dream apocalypse like idea. Like I was sitting there, I'm like, this is going to be me if this happens, but I don't have the skill or training like Bill does. But honestly, he knew this was coming. He was well prepared, as someone out there and probably Texas is also doing the same thing.
So all of this, however, changes 4 years later when a man named Frank falls into one of his traps. Bill is at first skeptical and hesitant to let anyone in his world, which is perfect for a post-apocalyptic world. He eventually relents and invites Frank in for dinner and the cleanup. Bill's walls are still coming down as the two share a meal together, but it's later when Frank gets Bill to play Linda Ronstadt's Long, Long Time on the piano that the two start truly to finally fall in love. So I just love the fact that, I mean, as we've already said, Bill is living his best life here in the apocalypse. He is an expert cook. I mean, that steak is perfect. And then he gets to actually start sharing that. I like kind of the comparison between Frank and Bill and Joel and Ellie here, because Frank rolls into Bill's life the same way that Ellie rolled into Joel's. I mean, Bill would have been completely happy to live the rest of his life alone because clearly he's thriving. I mean, he's not only just thriving here, his entertainment while he's eating dinner is watching walkers and people just walk into his traps and die. Like, that's his entertainment. Like,
that's his HBO Max. Yeah. Yeah. He's loving it. I love this whole sequence of events. And I think this is exactly how you differentiate yourself from other post-apocalyptic stories. This episode does that on so many different levels. But yeah, the introduction of Frank, I was trying to, this whole episode, it took me like halfway through. This whole episode, I was like trying to figure out who the hell this actor was playing Frank. I was like, I know this guy. And I finally clicked for me, at least personally, what I've seen him in is White Lotus, season 1.
White Lotus. He's perfect in White Lotus.
And he plays a very different character in White Lotus. So it kind of took me a little bit to get my brain around that in this show. But he killed it.
What's interesting about his casting specifically is that when they were casting for this show, they were actually casting before White Lotus came out. So he didn't have the notoriety of White Lotus to kind of back him up. They just loved him as an actor.
Wow.
And it's about damn time, because I mean, Murray Bartlett has been around for a while, but between this and White Lotus, he's finally having his time to shine. And like, the dude is amazing. He can do pretty much any role. And just these two shows really show his range.
Yeah, I mean, he acted his ass off in this episode, honestly. But yeah, the whole I was rewatching it just before we started this. The whole scene when they have that meal, he's like, "Wow, this rabbit is so good paired with this wine," and then he stands up and he's like, "I've been eyeing this thing as I walked in." And he goes over to the piano. He finds the music that he's like, "Oh, yeah, this is what you're into, Bill. I know this is you." And then he sits down, starts playing that, which I was enjoying. When Frank was playing, honestly. I'm a sucker for piano, but I was enjoying that. And then Bill's like, hey, stop. And then Bill sits down and plays the piano. And that was a very emotional part of the episode for me. And you could really see the reverence in which Bill was playing that song. Just from even when he ends the song and he lifts his fingertips up from the keys. Such a great scene. But you can see that Frank is seeing the pain that Bill has as he's playing that song. And he asks, like, who's the girl you're singing about? And then Bill's like, there is no girl. And Frank's like, I know. And like, goddamn, I love that part. That's so good.
So Linda Ronstadt's long time. I think it's so important for us at this point to kind of talk about this song and how perfect it is for the episode, because the lyrics of it are saying here, everyone tells me that love will find me, that the pain of heartache and loss and disconnection will go away. No, it doesn't. And the person that I long for from afar, I will love them forever in like the most unrequited manner. And it's talking about how Bill has lived his entire life. And I think it's really important for us to just understand just that, because the creators said that one thing that they found when they talked to a lot of married gay men to kind of consult for the episode, especially married middle-aged gay men, because that's a whole different thing and something we haven't seen a lot of to this point in media.
That's a good point.
They were saying when they were talking to these consultants that there are people who you don't really know that they're gay. There are people who you aren't quite sure about. And then there are people who you can say, I see you. And it's this moment where Frank sees Bill. Bill's sexuality is something that he's buried, not because he was in the closet anymore. I mean, we're in the apocalypse. There's nobody around. He can live his own life, but it's him who he's closeted from. It's him who has essentially buried his own sexuality. And I think it's really important that we talk about this kind of thing, especially today, because there are so many people out there. There's a whole generation of people out there who have lived this closeted way their entire life and have never been able to, number one, admit to themselves, but also tell the world and tell their family, this is who I am, this is who I love, and let me live and love how I live and love. I mean, there are people that are very close to me that are that way, who they cannot come out because of how it would change dynamics. And I love that we see Bill especially in this role, because Bill is clearly this very conservative guy who we know which way he would have voted in the last few elections, for sure. And he's the perfect character for us to see having this coming out moment, and having this other character also in Frank say, I see you, and not only do I see you, but I'm the person that you need. Bill is this person who all he lives for is survival. And it is Frank who comes in to be this nurturing character, this person that can bring the best out of Bill and provides in Bill a purpose.
I want to give you a round of applause for how well you said that about everything. And something about that is that I kind of related to Bill for a long time. So I was married for about 1.5 years, and I was with the guy for about 8 years. Until finally, like most people, they were scared, but I finally came out. And now I'm with my girlfriend, who I've been with for about I was actually 5 months yesterday. So
Congrats.
yeah. So now I'm living the life that Bill and Frank have now. So it was cute to watch it with her and be sitting down like, this is kind of how we were. It's not post-apocalyptic.
I mean, we're still going through a pandemic, so
Pretty much. I mean, I guess it's kind of apocalyptic, but I really enjoyed how you said that and explained it, because there's a lot of it's very touchy subject, and I bet HBO was really not nervous to like play this episode out, especially with all the gamers out there who are like, this isn't how the game is or was. I mean, you don't get that backstory. So they just took a shot in the dark, and I have heard nothing but good comments about this episode from everyone at work, my friends. So it was great. It was great to see their connection.
No, again, this part just shows who they are. And I think it's a very human scene. And I think that's why I really just connected with it and loved it. You just see this whole thing with Bill, as you were kind of saying, Nick, where you haven't seen this character in this manner or in this light before leading up to this moment. He, as you said, he shows that he's vulnerable for the first time, and Frank takes care of him. And a lot of times I expect the worst out of people just in life. But I was expecting the worst out of Frank in this episode as well. But Frank gives us / Bill the best, the positive side of humanity, which I really loved.
And I love how this whole episode wasn't even based on the dangers of the infection. It was literally people on the outside world. Like, you're fenced in with your family, and what the dangers are other humans and not the infection that's going around. So I like that little world that they created in little boutiques and their shops and their little wine bar or whatever they have going on over there in their little garden.
So obviously Frank ends up staying with Bill in his town of 1. Well, now it's town of 2. And the show skips 3 years ahead, and the two have built a partnership that has its ups and downs. Frank has a very different worldview than Bill, which is very apparent from the second that they meet, and often is the source of their disagreements. Frank is not happy in a solitary environment, whereas that is the kind of environment that Bill loves and craves. And that's when Frank invites Tess and Joel over for lunch, when Bill's patience is tested most. The friendship turns out to be quite the useful smuggling operation, at least at first. Again, these guys are brilliant in their writing and how they have chosen the theme of this show to be love. I mean, this is a true life love story in this episode, and we see every facet of love. And it shows in this section especially that love, it's not just the first few years of a relationship, like the cupcake, all sunshine and roses. Like, love is hard. And when you love somebody, I mean, fighting is a part of love. Not only are you going to fight for somebody, but you're gonna fight with somebody. I mean, it just happens. And we can see that though Frank may not have the survival skills that Bill has, what he has is a nurturing side to him, and he makes Bill's world and house a home full of life and friends. Frank says that paying attention to the things that we have is how we show love. And I think the contrast of both of them, it's equally what each of them needs in each other. Frank needs somebody to help him survive. I mean, Frank was part of a group where was that again?
Baltimore? Was that what
Baltimore? Yeah, he was in Baltimore, QZ in Baltimore, and the QZ got overrun by the infected. And Frank says in the pit that he came from a group of 12 and now he's a group of 1. So clearly he doesn't have what it takes to like survive long term, but that's what Bill has. But what Bill doesn't have is a life. And that's what Frank brings to him, is a life full of love, full of life, full of laughter, and not just the things to survive, like the bare essentials, but actually have a life. Frank like wants to like make the wine cellar nice. He wants to make the boutique nice, the flower shop to be nice, build a garden. And that's not essential for living in the apocalypse, but it's essential for a life.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved how they they showcase that love can be messy and that people are very different. These people are very different. I mean, after that lovely scene that we just talked about, you know, it cuts to, 3 years later or whatever.
Like, we go straight from a love scene to an argument and a fight.
Yes. And Frank's, talking to Bill and it's like, you live in a world where the government was behind 9/11 and they're all Nazis. And then Bill's like,
they're all
Nazis. And then Frank's like, well, now, I love that part. And then, Frank's like, I've been actually talking to a really nice woman on the radio. And Bill's like, you what? And then it cuts to them eating lunch with Joel and Tess. Like, I just love that even though they're very different people, they balance each other out, as you were kind of saying. They need one another in multiple different ways. They're good partners, I should say.
I just love at the dinner scene when we first see them. Bill has that gun on the table and Frank's like, oh, Bill, what the heck?
And it's just Joel and Bill sitting across from one another, like just like eyeing one another, and Tess and Frank are just chatting it up.
I almost thought that like maybe Joel was holding a gun under the table.
It's like a Greedo Han Solo scene. Yeah, but I just really love this set of events. The strawberries scene I thought was also very special. It showcased their love for one another. And I think another way, that it wasn't just young new love honeymoon phase. It was showing how that relationship evolved over the years. And yeah, that got me. I was tearing up during that part, not gonna lie. I just thought it was a really, really beautiful storytelling, honestly. But they kind of sprinkled humor in there. Frank's like, not in the strawberries. And then Bill's like, right. I just can't say enough about how I really just loved seeing Bill and Frank's relationship in this episode.
I literally low-key thought for some reason that in that strawberry patch, someone was going to get infected. I was like, this can't be so like
it's too
gooey
perfect
this whole episode. But it would have just ruined the whole episode. But for some reason, I'm like, oh my God, the mushrooms are going to come get you. And well, that didn't happen. It would turn it out to be a nice little love scene. It was very cute, little bantering, little beautiful, gorgeous men.
And I can't remember if it was while they were in the strawberry patch or if it was a bit before, but I think Bill says to Frank, I was never afraid until you showed up, which again, I think we're just really seeing the humanity of these two characters really just played out, and major props to both of these actors just killing it. I was just glued in the whole time. I was like, wow, I'm just am like eating this up. And it has nothing to do with Ellie and Joel. You know, these are two brand new characters we're introduced to in this episode that I was fully engrossed in their story. I didn't have any thought in my head, oh, where's Joel and Ellie? You know, I was fully living in the moment with these characters.
I love how at the end of the episode last week, we said we can't wait for an hour and 20-minute episode to like get a longer episode. Yet it felt like one of the shortest so far. Like it was gone so quickly.
Yeah. Paige, when you told us last week, oh, hey, I think episode 3 is going to be like an hour and 20 minutes. I was like, oh, hell yeah. Cool. And yeah, like it just flew by. It felt like a little mini movie almost for me. And I'm just, again, giving props to everybody involved with the episode because it's hard to do that, honestly, at least for me, to get me that involved in characters in such a short amount of time. And it was done so right, you know, tracking their 15 years, whatever they had together in the show. They did that so well, just kind of skipping every 3 years. And then, you know, at the end, about 10 years. But
I know for a fact we didn't get much of a background in the games with Bill and Frank, and I heard a lot of controversy from the gamer fan base that they didn't put more of the importance of Bill and Frank and Joel and Ellie meeting. But I don't think they actually needed to do that because all they needed, Ellie and Joel, was the battery, and they gave it to that. So I'm glad they did like a backstory that we would have no idea would have happened. It gave more life to the episode and more life to the show, because the show is about love and nurturing and caring. So there's just another step. I'm just excited to see the next episode now because I have no idea what's going to happen because I was not expecting this whatsoever.
So Bill is reluctant to take Joel and Tess's help, even when Joel tries to convince Bill that they need each other to survive, and he can get hard to find supplies that would keep them safe. Lo and behold, 3 years later, raiders come at night and they are heavily armed while most are taken out by Bill's fence and traps. Bill gets shot taking out one of the last raiders. He survives and realizes that they may need those supplies that Joel was talking about after all. So I really love to see Bill and Joel's relationship here because Bill finds a reluctant, not friendship, but respect for Joel because they're both protectors. They're protecting those that they love. Bill's whole existence has become, at this point, protecting Frank from the rest of the world. And here he has to open up his world to more people. And it's when he gets shot that we see in that moment that he's lying on the table what Frank does, what he does best, and that is nurturing and taking care of people. All that Bill is worried about is making sure that when he dies, which like he is already resigned himself to die, he wants to ensure that Frank will continue to be protected by calling Joel. I think that it was such a cool, I mean, it's a great way to see the dynamic of how each balance each other out so perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, I just really enjoyed the 10 minutes, probably around there, that we got to see Bill taking care of Frank. And that I think was really powerful because, you know, within like 50 minutes, we got to see Bill and Frank's entire love story. And as we're kind of saying, Nick, when those Raiders, thank you. When the Raiders showed up and Bill got hurt, you know, I was like, oh, okay, how's this going to go? Because I obviously this has already been very different than from what the game covered. But I was like, oh, are they going to, you know, have Frank survive and Bill not be there, or how's it going to kind of go down? But yeah, just getting to see Frank take care of Bill, and at the same time, Bill be like, hey, man, here's the whole game plan. I made copies of the keys. Talk to Joel. He'll take care of you. He had already thought all this out because Bill is quite a bit older, I believe, than Frank in the show. And so he had already kind of planned that if and when he was gone, that Frank would be okay. But we got to see Frank taking care of Bill in that moment, and then flash forward to Bill taking care of Frank. But I just really enjoyed that dynamic of those partners taking care of one another. I thought that was really beautiful.
It was nice to see the strong, independent, strong-willed man take care of his partner. I really agree with you on that. It was sweet to see him, getting him tucked into bed and getting him in his wheelchair.
So, as we've just alluded to, the episode then jumps 10 years to the present timeline, 2023. Frank is ailing and in a wheelchair, and Bill, who has also aged quite a bit, is still doting on his partner. In a world where you don't often get a choice on how you die, Frank decides to take his death in his own hands. He wants to have the perfect final day with Bill, getting married and having a great last dinner. Then he wants Bill to crush up a bunch of pills and put them in his wine so he can die in his sleep. Bill says no, then reluctantly agrees. However, when dinner comes to an end, he changes one slight detail. He also drinks a pill-riddled wine, and they go upstairs and fall asleep in each other's arms one last time. So, again, we're talking about the overarching theme being love, and we see here that there is a price to love, and that is pain. I mean, we see that when they're eating strawberries together, Bill says to Frank that he's sorry that he's growing old. And then when we jump to 2023, we see that it's Frank who has MS or ALS. They don't actually say which it is. The creators also said they wanted it to be a little ambiguous, but whatever he has some sort of musculodegenerative disease. And it is Bill who has to deal with that fact. I mean, even though it was Bill in the Strawberry Patch saying, I'm sorry, I'm the one growing old, it's really then switched when we jump. And though his entire existence since Frank entered his life was to protect Frank in any way possible, he actually can't, in the end, protect Frank from his own body. It's so painful and heartbreaking to see this dynamic at this point.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying about the disease that Frank did have, because it was a little ambiguous, which I kind of liked because it kind of left that a door open a little bit. But yeah, again, kind of, seeing Bill taking care of Frank in basically every regard, even like that little scene where Frank's trying to open up his pill bag, and he's got a name for each one of the pills he's given him. And I'm sure like at least with some of those supplies that we're using, that Joel and Tess were helpful in getting those supplies that were helping Frank.
When they both decided to, not both decided, when they decided to die in their sleep together, that they didn't die from infection and they didn't die from the outside world. They chose to die together inside their community that they built. And I thought it was just like a beautiful picture and image. And
I really enjoyed that whole last day that they had together, whether it was exchanging of rings or Bill preparing the exact same meal that he had originally had made for Frank with a specific wine, and I think it was rabbit that Frank had loved so much that first time. I think that was really the details like that really made this whole show, or I should say this whole episode, for me.
They pretty much brought it into full circle. They had the same thing when they found each other and the same thing when they died. And it was just perfect ending for those two.
Yeah, even from like the little details to like how Bill was pouring the wine when he first served that meal to Frank, and then their last meal when he was pouring the wine, exact same shot almost. It was stuff like that where I was like, wow, like attention to detail is crazy. And right, like they went out on their own terms in the post-apocalyptic world. Everything that could have happened, they went out how they wanted to together.
And as you said, Paige, it was very much a controversial decision to change the fates of both of these characters and change the story from the show. Neil Druckmann says that it was where he actually decided it was all right, not only to retell the story, but also change the fate of these characters, was when he weighed how Bill and Frank's story would continue to develop the theme of the show, which is love, and showing another side to these characters and how they choose to love and what they will do for love that is different from the video game. I mean, in the video game, we find that Bill and Frank like had some sort of like spat, and they like broke up, or they went their separate ways. And then Bill and Joel come upon Frank, who has hung himself after being bit, and Bill just says something that this was his partner. That's all we get. So I mean, it's kind of ambiguous whether or not the character is actually gay or not, whether this is just his partner in the apocalypse or his life partner. And I think that they did such a good, both Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, to just use this opportunity to develop more, again, showing the different sides of love and showing all aspects of love, showing the different kinds of love out there. I mean, straight love, gay love, post-apocalyptic love, all that. It's all being represented here and showing the different, again, human side to what love is. And that's not something that we usually see in Hollywood, in media, in TV shows. We get this very exaggerated version of love, and here we're seeing an extremely human story through this show. And I think it's the strongest part of the show.
Yeah, now that you say that, I didn't even realize it during the games. I was just partner in crime. We're buddies. We're just defeating the infection together type thing. It didn't even come across as that. And plus it was 2013 when it came out. So it wasn't
very different kind of world than we're living today, for sure.
Yeah. So no one even probably thought twice about it. So now making the story and the history of Bill and Frank, it was such a great add-on, and I'm glad that they decided to do it.
Yeah, I think that's why I really enjoyed this episode. Is the show has done a great job of really following pretty beat for beat the video game, but going in a very different direction in this episode. It was all very fresh and new for me, and I think that's partially why and it was done so well. I think that's partially why I just fell in love with the whole episode.
Well, finally, after this tragic loss to us as the audience, Joel and Ellie arrive to get their help, finding a note informing them of what happened and to not go upstairs. They should just take the truck and anything else that they need. So the two take off in Bill's truck to go find Tommy in Wyoming, since Tommy is an ex-Firefly and he can probably point Joel in the right direction of where to bring Ellie, or so he hopes. So I think that it was not only was I crying already when, like, weeping when Bill and Frank decide to go out together in each other's arms, but what really just drove that knife even further into my heart is when Ellie reads that note that Bill left for Joel. I mean, Neil Druckmann brought up that Bill is actually very lucky that the person he loves the most is going out of this world at the end of his own life. And so that choice to let him go and to help him to take his own life, that choice is a lot easier. But that really reflects outward to say that what happens when you lose somebody you love and there is still so much life to live, because that's what's happened to Joel, not once, but twice now. The cruelest part that in Bill's note that he leaves behind for Joel is that what he feels is a gift to Joel in all his possessions in his house, in his stash of weapons, and that he thought, as in Bill thought, that it was awesome when everybody died, but it turns out I was wrong. It turns out that what a person like me is here for is to love a person, save that person, and keep that person alive for as long as I am alive. That's what Bill is here for. And you, Joel, you are exactly like me. Use this gift to keep Tess safe. Bill doesn't know. Of course, he's not going to know that Joel has failed, not just with Tess, but also with Sarah. And so it just drives that knife even deeper. It's just such a heartbreaking moment to realize that, I mean, Joel has failed. What he does best is protecting people, and he's failed the people he loves the most.
But this will also drive him to keep Ellie safe throughout the whole rest of the season, because he's like, I don't want to fail again. And it's another motivation that a lot of people that haven't played the game will now realize. So it was also a nice little I know they made a note in the game too. It was a little different, but I'm glad they did the note in the show this way as well.
And you see after this note that Joel has a choice. He has a choice to just leave, and he almost leaves Ellie at this point. But you see there's a moment in there that you see it all click for him, and he realizes it's now Ellie that he needs to protect. And you see that relationship start to change. Joel isn't so confrontational with Ellie. He isn't so sharp with Ellie. He genuinely starts to warm up to her, especially when they get in the car.
It's probably Ellie's first time having like a house and like walking around and taking a shower and being like a little quote family that she's never had before. And I think that kind of touches Joel's heart as well in the show. So it was beautiful to see that little bantering about like, you stink. You need to go take a shower, and messing around with the truck because she's never seen one because it looks like a spaceship. Which, if you guys don't know, Ellie is obsessed with space. So that's a little hint for the future for Ellie.
Yeah, and I liked, like you were saying, how it all kind of comes into place and clicks for Joel here in the end, compared to at the beginning of the episode. He's still processing Tess's death and is resistant, I think, a bit to continuing on, even though it was Tess's dying wish with Ellie. But yeah, this kind of reaffirms what his goal is, and he just lays that out with Ellie. It's like, hey, I'm going to find my brother. He was connected with the Fireflies. Here's the rules if you want to come with me. And that'll set up the rest of the show from here.
And Ellie gets her gun.
Yes. And I would say too, like this, I know I haven't really heard of this, like people saying this online, but this is definitely not a filler episode. This developed Ellie and Joel, even without them being in the episode very much. Like they only have like probably 20 minutes of screen time in this hour and 20-minute long episode, but they are developed, and we get a lot more emotional weight to the world as an audience. But Ellie and Joel are still developed, and their relationship is developed throughout this episode.
And I think it is because of the entire story of Bill and Frank that really informs Joel's reaction to that note, and that note really being what changes everything inside his heart for Ellie. We needed that as an audience for the weight of that note to really hit home. So absolutely, it isn't just a filler episode. It absolutely isn't just a side story that really doesn't matter. It absolutely matters completely to this change in Joel, and also informs the pain that is going to inform not only Joel, but especially Pedro Pascal's portrayal of Joel, the pain that we will see informing a lot of his decisions going forward into the future episodes, of what informs his, especially what I'm already guessing is going to be this intense, primal desire to protect Ellie no matter the cost.
Yeah, I mean, that whole note, again, just the message resonates with Joel, and we as an audience fully understand why, because that resonates with us as well as an audience.
And finally, we end this episode, and this is something I want to just see if you guys noted. I know the internet definitely noted it, so I wanted to see if you guys noted the final shot, the window shot. Anything come to mind?
I know that the window shot is very popular for like the posters for Last of Us, but I didn't really put anything together.
It's the starting screen.
The starting screen for what?
Oh, like the game.
The video game.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like actual, yes. Like where you click on the game, opens up, and it's the starting. Oh.
It's a little darker, and not darker, but like more gloomy and everything. But yeah, it makes sense.
That's cool. Okay.
So
yeah,
there was actually a plan to incorporate this window in every episode. That was the original broad plan. And that would kind of be the start of every episode or the end of every episode to kind of be the bookends. But what like their actual like real vision for this was that they thought that they could actually play like 5 or 10 minutes of just taking a window shot from each episode and just putting that at the beginning of every episode, but then give the audience an option to just skip the intro like you can in HBO. You can skip the intro, you can skip the recap. So instead of saying skip, they wanted it to say play.
That would have been really cool.
Just like the game. That didn't end up happening, but that would have been such a cool thing for the audience, for the especially the fans of the game. But that's what this last shot at this episode was supposed to be. It was a very intentional choice that they had.
And it also tied in like the game and that they left the window open because they didn't want the house to smell. So that's pretty cool. I should have realized that, but I didn't spend a lot of time on the game page menu. But I know like a lot of the window scenes is a lot of posters with like the guitar sitting up next to the wall type thing. So yeah, I see it. That's pretty cool.
So with that, we've reached the end of the synopsis, and I just want to open the floor up to you guys if we missed anything during our discussion that you thought really should be brought up and we could talk about.
I don't think we missed anything because I think we captured a lot of the main points and all of the greatness of this episode. But I just want to say that who else is excited that season 2 got greenlighted and that it's going to be based off of part 2, which I'm getting nervous to see who they're going to.
Paige, you called it. You called it in episode 1 of our podcast. So great job.
And this will probably push them a little more to make like a part 3 video game. I saw like they're going to think about it. They just want to make sure that they have the story and the right theme to go with the game is what they're worried about.
I still think that they need to do a season between Austin and Boston.
That'd be cool to even have like flashbacks. Maybe they'll do that in this season too. I don't know. But I'm super hyped and excited for season 2 already. And honestly, I could see if they wanted to, since the second game, at least in my opinion, seems like a lot larger of a story, encompasses a lot more. You know, I think they could, if they really wanted to, make the second game into a season 2 and 3, just because there's a lot more going on in there. But I am excited to see when we get some casting news about other characters that would be popping up in season 2 for sure.
I mean, I don't want to like spoil too much for people that haven't like actually played the second game. I saw something online that Neil Druckmann has followed someone on Instagram that looks identical to Abby. So we already know that they're going to probably get that process going and start filming.
Speaking of casting, I mean, can we just talk about Nick Offerman just for a little bit? I mean, just his portrayal of Bill here. Nick Offerman is one of my favorite people. I mean, I'm a huge Ron Swanson fan, so that's number one. But I mean, what a change of pace for Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman is really known for a lot of his like comedic roles. I mean, everything from the cameos he's made to, I mean, Ron Swanson, of course, in Parks and Rec. He's such a comedic actor, but this is such a change of pace for him. It's a dramatic role that he absolutely kills.
I'm not very familiar with his work, but I really appreciate how he portrayed Bill to the fullest. So I think he did a great job, even for me that I did no idea who he really was until the show started.
And I mean, yes, in real life, he is straight, but I think, and I know there's a lot of controversy out there about whether straight or gay actors should be playing straight or gay roles and everything, and especially with inclusivity and all of that. But I think
this is called acting.
Exactly.
He did really good at acting, and it felt real, so he did his job.
And Nick Offerman, in his own personal life, has always been a massive ally for the LGBTQ movement. So I think that they really did a good job here in this casting, and his portrayal really was beautiful.
100%. Yeah, like I said, they both, Frank and Bill's characters were played so beautifully. Just fell in love with the people that we saw on screen.
And like Joel, we are also both just in love, but also just heartbroken. We're all in tears. And this was supposed to be the happy episode. Come on.
Yeah, I was pretty happy though. I mean, we all probably ended the show and we're smiling and just geeking over everything that's happened.
We've had, major deaths in every episode. We've had, Sarah in episode 1, Tess in episode 2, double whammy of Frank and Bill in episode 3, which, that's the apocalyptic world we're living in this show. But it's heavy hitting, it's emotional, but I think it's super strong and beautiful television. And as you were mentioning, I was teary-eyed and emotional, several times throughout this episode. I think even when this whole season's wrapped up and everything, that I'm going to look back on episode 3 as something that looked really special.
I agree with you too.
Well, with that brings us to the end of the episode, and just wanted to say I'm loving our time together, that we can just talk about this. This episode was just so beautiful. And with that, I think we've done everything we can say about this show, about this episode. So with that, I just want to give you guys one more chance to give your final reviews and final thoughts, and also let us know again where we can find you and follow what's going on in your lives.
I have no more final thoughts about this. I'm just excited for the next episode on Sunday. As always, you can follow my awkward little Instagram at RacerXGirl. Woo! So we'll see you guys next week.
And yeah, I just really love this episode. We're looking forward to next week's already, honestly. And yeah, if you want to collaborate with any photography, feel free to hit me up on Instagram at christophers.snap.shots.
And as usual, you can find me at nick.fleeto.leach on Instagram, and join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/group/the Cinema Club TCC, and listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And you can message me on Facebook if you'd like to be on the podcast. Already, we've been getting some people responding to the episodes we're doing right now. We might bring on a couple people in a couple later episodes of this Last of Us show. So with that, finally, leave us a review on iTunes. And with that, thanks so much, and we will see you on the next one.